guys, welcome to UARC Bass HQ. We are so excited to get this YouTube channel up and running. We are gonna do talks like this, try to get them bi-weekly, and every month we're gonna talk about our favorite lures, and we're gonna try to have a bunch of guests, especially people that are on the team, come and just get honest content for you guys. Along with videos like this, we're also going to have on the water content, tournament practice, tournament day fishing, and just a bunch of other stuff that we do. We have some collabs in the future with some other clubs at the university that we're looking forward to. But yeah, thanks for tuning in to our first episode. We are going to be going over our favorite lures of this mid to late winter season and kind of target that February bite. But yeah, we're just gonna have a conversation. So, Jacob, would you like to start off with the lure that you've kind of been targeting?
Yeah, so my name is Jacob Wandel. I run all the social media here on the club, and I also try to fish as much as I can. So first bait that I guess we'll go ahead and talk about here is a pretty popular one. It's the old Demiki rig. We're using the 3-inch scope shad on one of the Buckeye jigs. We've been using this lure quite a bit this winter here. The main goal with this bait is just to kind of get out and find where those shad are hanging out on the lake. And the minute you start to see some shad, this is a great lure to go ahead and pick up and pitch in front of those bass's face chasing the shad. The past club tournament series that we had, all of our fish pretty much came on this exact lure. The 3-inch scope shad, specifically on a more white / translucent shad color. It matched the hatch almost exact. And these fish were just slamming that Demiki rig. Whenever we'd be out on the main lake, we'd find kind of shad scattered out, and we would only find probably 1 or 2 spotted bass hanging out around those shad. And it was pretty much a guarantee. If you threw this right in their face, they would hit it almost every time. Yeah. But in the wintertime, when those fish are really hard to catch and they're kind of picky in terms of what they want to eat, they might be chasing your lure but not exactly biting it. The Demiki rig does a pretty good job of almost guaranteeing to get them a bite on that when those days do get hard. It does mean you have to spend a little more time looking down at that screen. But if it gets fish in the boat, I mean, that's the main goal at the end of the day, obviously.
Yeah, and I know people are getting tired of hearing this bait on every YouTube video, every boat ramp, every tackle shop, but it comes down to the fact that it does catch fish this time of year.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it really mimics those bait fish.
Yeah, and so for our tournament last year on Table Rock Lake for MLF series, this was almost on the deck of every boat at that tournament. And, it is one of those lures that is kind of heavily in trend right now, and I don't see it going away.
No.
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon, no. But it's a really interesting bait. It's brought up a lot of controversy in the bass fishing scene, and I've honestly enjoyed just seeing what people can do with it, right? Just crazy numbers of fish on lakes that you wouldn't really expect it.
Especially for how simple of a bait it is.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, I don't know if you guys are, members of our Instagram channel, but we posted a photo and it was a bass, and what was really cool about that was the bait fish that was, in that photo. It looked almost identical to this. I tried squinting my eyes to look at the photo, and it blended in with but yeah, that 3-inch scope shad is a real kicker this time of year.
Money.
Another thing for some of those bass that might be a little bit shallower than with the Demiki rig, some of those largemouth that might have pushed up on those rocks that are still holding heat, is a jerk bait. Right here we've got a Megabass 110 +2 just to get down a little bit deeper. The +1 can reach some of them too. And it's just more of an erratic action that can really draw those fish. You can pause it for a while and then they can let them look at it, but sometimes they want it a little bit faster. At that last Club Series tournament, my boat was mainly throwing a jerk bait, and you could let it pause there for 10 seconds and they'd look at it and swim off. But if you jerked it a little bit faster, sometimes it'd cause a reaction strike and those fish would come out there and grab it. On those cloudy days, you might want to throw more of a matte shad color or something bright white. While on the sunny days, you want something a little bit more natural, maybe a little bit of chrome in it, just to give some flash when the sun's out. But that's another bait in the wintertime that can put some fish in the boat that might be finicky or not want to bite a wiggle wort or something like that.
Yeah. So like, how do you go about deciding if you're gonna throw like a 110 or a deep diving versus a shallow diving jerk bait? What goes through your mind when you're deciding to throw those?
Just kind of depends on what the structure is. If there's like a big rock sticking out you can be in like 15 feet of water. Maybe there's a rock sticking up to 8 feet or something. You just want to tap that rock, and you can go with the +2 and go down there. The jerk bait might strike the rock, and that sound will create something that the fish isn't used to. So he'll come investigate, and he'll see your jerk bait up there and might try to hit it. Or if you're fishing like around some dead grass or something, and you don't want to get all the way down in the grass, you want to stay above it, you can get a +1. Or just in some of those more pea gravel type banks that aren't super deep, you can use a +1 or whatnot too.
So are you trying to like hit cover usually?
Normally around cover, unless you're individually seeing fish on the screen and you're target casting to them. But if you're just blind casting out, going down the bank or across a flat or whatnot, a lot of times you're targeting that cover and trying to get the fish to come off of it.
Yeah. And like at Ozark Lakes with, cedar trees, all everywhere basically, it's kind of funny, like the number one bait I find caught in trees that have been broken off are like Smithwick rogues or just any sort of jerk bait. Because just pop them over the tops of these trees in 50 feet of water, but they're topping out in 2 to 3 feet below the surface.
Yeah,
that's like a tried and true method. Yeah.
And that Smithwick rogue's been catching them that way for a while.
Yeah. All right. I guess I'll go with one of mine. This is kind of a lure that I've always thrown in the winter, even before I had live scope. And to be honest with you, I would feel confident out of all these baits with fishing without live scope system, it would be this crankbait. This is an Ozark classic. This is just a wiggle wart. I know a lot of people, there's the talks about like OG wiggle wart versus like the Storm, but I haven't really got my hands on any of the OG ones.
I'm saving a couple of them.
Yeah, yes.
Of course.
For the viewers at home, if you would like to rob a tackle store, his is the one to do it. No. So London actually asked me right before this video. He was like, "Are you throwing a red?" And yeah, I am. In the wintertime, I will be throwing this red wiggle wart a lot. I don't know, just for some reason in the cold, it's like a crawfish imitation, and I feel like fish on rock are keying in on that.
Yeah. A lot of times, like going into pre-spawn, I end up throwing that red color a lot. But then more in the winter, I always find like in creeks and whatnot in the winter, if you'll catch a few crawfish, they normally have a more dull color to them. So I normally throw like a more green or natural color wiggle wart in the winter.
Which leads me into like the other one. This is like a 6 to 8 foot diving crankbait. This is called the Rock Crawler by Spro. This is another classic. I mean, like you said, this is a more dull, translucent color, and I don't know. I think both these baits work really well, especially around rock. The 45-degree bank, and they just. If you are looking just to fish and cover water, this is a bait to pick up. And I mean, I will be throwing this a lot in the next few weeks.
Yeah, one thing about that rock crawler, like they've got a shallower version and a deeper version. So if you've got those rocks or trees topping out in 6 to 8 feet, you can grab the shallower version. But if they're topping out in 12 to 14, they've also got a deeper version of the rock crawler. Oh. And like this color here is actually a copy of an OG wiggle wart color called the V87.
Oh, okay.
That's cool. I remember last year at Table Rock on the MLF College, we went after one of the practice days, and about every single Spro rock crawler was sold out at that basketball shop. So to say that these work is an understatement, and there's a lot of people that know about these that they catch fish, especially this time of the year.
Yeah, and like I said, a big kicker with this one is you don't have to have a live scope to throw this lure. I mean, just find a rocky bank, and you can cover ground really fast with it. It's kind of nice. We have a tournament on in Grove, fishing Lake Grand, and to cover water on that first practice day, I know we will be picking up this lure just to see if we can find and locate some fish.
Yeah, locating fish at crankbait's a big thing you can do quickly with.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to talk about something else? I mean,
over here I got a couple of swim baits. But for these swim baits, obviously I'm not throwing these as much during the winter time. But during the pre-spawn, or when that pre-spawn's coming up, a good one that I like to throw is this Madness Balaam 245. This is a really nice JDM lure. This thing's quite big than your typical lure, but the nice action that I like about this is it's a multi-joint run here. So instead of just the glide action, it's got a little bit more of a smooth flow to it. And one of my favorite things to do with this bait is go up to shallower flats where those fish might be spawning on beds. And if you chuck this thing next to a bed or close to it, you're guaranteed
to eat the eggs.
You are guaranteed to at least get a reaction out of that fish. Maybe not a bite on the first time, but there's been quite a few bites I've gotten by just pitching this up in shallower ends, and even having them follow up to the boat. It's pretty fun watching those fish come up. And this thing is it's a beast to throw. You definitely don't want to lose it, but it's just so much fun to use. And I'm definitely a big swim bait guy. I throw a lot of glide baits, swim baits, and this is probably in my top 5 for all of them. It's just such a unique bait, and the action to it is just sweet. It gets those bites when you need them.
Yeah, and like you said, I'm itching for it to get a little warmer. That spring season, I like throwing those bigger baits, especially my buddy Eric. Me and him are going to be targeting, a bigger bite, if anything. But yeah, I guess on the lines of that kind of brings us into the pre-spawn area. The water will be warming up a lot. It's kind of a 50-50 bait for me to throw because it's almost like the glide bait. It's just about if I can actually be around fish that will commit to the lure. It's an A-rig. Just like the glide bait, you are going to catch a range of size of fish. I mean, from
Just draws a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't been throwing it recently because it has been really cold, and I feel like these fish are pulled off the rock more in the middle of channels and deeper water. So I have been throwing the Demiki rig, but whenever these fish kind of get around a coverable structure that I can target heavily, I'll be throwing the A-rig more. I don't know about you guys though. Like, when do you throw the A-rig?
Any point of the year you can, honestly, with how much attention they draw. Just depends on how active those fish are and if they want to come explore a school of minnows. And how big of minnows you put on the bait determines a lot of things. So if you're in the summertime or whatnot and you put on 5-inch cottonticks or more the 5-6-inch swim baits, then you can't really throw it in the winter. But if you're putting more 3-inch swim baits on there, then they can still bite it in the winter and whatnot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the A-rig, it really just depends on how active the fish are. A lot of times I find certain times of the year the fish don't want a whole school of shad, and they're just picking off
They
small.
just let it go pick on that one that's all by itself, kind of like a.
So that's where
swim.
the Demiki rig might be better than the A-rig. That's kind of what we found. The last Club Series tournament was that pitching an A-rig at them, they weren't as interested. But when they saw a minnow more singled out, just hanging out, they figured that's a little bit of an easier bite.
Did y'all throw like single swimmer, like 4 or 5-inch swim baits at all?
We did actually. We had some paddle tails on.
I did too. Did you catch anything on it?
I'll be honest.
No, I didn't either.
Which was surprising, I thought.
We were around a lot of fish, and I had Colton, my co-angler, was throwing the Demiki rig, and I was throwing basically this lure, this Kitech, on like a 1/4 ounce ball. We were around a ton of fish on this one point, and I mean, I could not get them to bite.
Yeah, no, I was surprised because we had a little secret tip that this was kind of the juice at the time, was these just little Kitech pedal tails just on a swim jig. And surprisingly, none of the fish we would throw that didn't really seem as interested compared to the Demiki rig. They seemed to like the more, and honestly, I feel like these have
More
less
subtle
action.
action, a little bit more subtle action.
And it's like
Finicky fish.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's throwing the Demiki rig right now, and so what I kind of try to do when I'm fishing is see what everyone's throwing and then kind of move away from that and try to give something the fish haven't seen in a while. And to me, that was the Kitech, right? Like everyone, about 3 years ago, were just like throwing the Kitech, throwing the single swimmer Kitech, and then that Demiki rig came out, and I was trying to move back to the Kitech single paddle, smaller swim bait, and it wasn't working. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting if you ask me, but.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I guess moving into another bait you can use in the pre-spawn, or honestly all year round. A really versatile bait is that lipless. First right here we got a Lucky Craft LV500. Of course you can use like a Strike King Red Eye Shad or the original Bill Lewis rattle trap, possibly their new hammer trap. But it's just that bait you can use through every depth of water that you have, whether it's 50 foot, you can let it sink down and do a yo-yo, or if it's pre-spawn in the grass and you're just trying to cover water, or if you're on a clear reservoir like Beaver Lake, you can go more of a translucent color and cover water that way if you're just looking for fish in their transition period during that pre-spawn. I always like to put a red hook on the front of mine. I just feel like they eat it better that way and you get a better hookup. Instead of just grabbing onto the back treble, a lot of times you end up with 2 trebles in their mouth. But it's just a simple bait you can use anywhere, any time of the year, and in any depth of water, depending on how fast you reel it and how you want to work it.
I've got a question for you on the rattle trap here.
Sounds good.
I'm someone that I never throw the rattle trap. I don't know why. It's just a lure that I've never really wanted to throw. What makes you want to throw the rattle trap over like a crankbait?
One thing, it's just a lot more versatile. Like when you're throwing a crankbait and you're going down a bank, and one section of the bank has a steep drop off, and then all of a sudden it's a flat. Well, if you go down with a crankbait in that steep section, you might want to pick up a 14-foot diver, and as you go down a little bit further, you need a 10-foot diver, and you keep on going down, and soon you need a square bill. So instead of having 4 rods on the deck, you can just have 1 rod with 1 lipless, and just reel it slower or faster. And a lot of times those liplesses have a bit more beads and they're louder than a lot of crankbaits are.
Yeah.
So they draw some attention, but they're also slimmer. So a lot of people like throwing those flat-sided crankbaits, but a lipless is also another flat-sided, skinnier bait that has a more subtle water wobble than like a square bill or something will. So if you get a lighter lipless, quarter ounce or whatnot, you can still throw it in 2 to 3 feet and get that skinnier wobble.
All right, we're gonna do a little aside here because I think it's funny. Welcome to our next section called What Do You Call It? Okay, what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna give a name of a lure and you are gonna say the version that you call it. For example, we just saw this happen. I'm gonna hold up this bait. Some would call this a
Rattle trap.
Rattle trap, or
some would call it a lipless crankbait.
Yep.
Personally, rattle trap is the only thing you can't call it. So
Around here, that's what we all
I mean,
grew up calling them, is just rattle traps. The old football-shaped minnow thing that you throw in the water and it makes a lot of sound. And everybody grew up calling it a rattle trap. A lot of people up north, I guess, always stuck with that lipless crankbait name. And then you go on Tackle Warehouse and whatnot, and you can't just type in a rattle trap and it all comes up sadly.
yeah.
But what do you guys think? Do you call it the rattle trap, or are you calling it more of a lipless crankbait? Because I feel like it's more where you live or where you grew up.
It's a rattle trap, okay? Is there any more? Okay, another one. Do you call it? Okay, I'm gonna try to. It's a Z-Man lure. It has like a metal movable blade on the front of it, and it has a skirt. What do you call it? No. What do you call it?
Do you call it a vibrating jig or a chatterbait?
Or a bladed jig?
I've heard bladed jig and chatterbait the most. So I feel like,
What do you call
I've always called it chatterbait.
Chatterbait.
You do? I call it a bladed jig.
Okay.
Really?
It's a bladed jig.
Bladed jig. Why bladed jig?
That's what it is. It's an archy head. Okay, archy head style jig.
Yeah.
Right? Let's be real. It's an archy jig
With a blade on the front.
with a blade on the front. So bladed jig, and you can fish it. Okay, a chatterbait. It sounds like you're constantly reeling it in for some reason. You know, with the bladed jig, it sounds like you can pop it off the bottom, flip it into cover. That's what I do with it at least.
It's a very versatile bait.
Yeah, it is.
So not like that lipless and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying. Okay, our next one. It's a small fish, and it's a lot of forage for bass, and it's not shad, but it's
Bluegill?
you call it bluegill.
It's a bluegill where I'm from.
What do you call it?
Bluegill or perch.
You call it perch?
Possibly.
You call it sunfish or brim?
Perch, brim, bluegill, panfish. It's all kinds of
Panfish?
things.
See, for me, the only fish that's truly a panfish is a crappie. I don't know why. I call them bluegill. All little fish, I call them bluegill. All right.
Okay.
You have any more?
Any ideas?
Is it a crankbait or is it a plug?
A what?
You ever heard that before?
A plug?
The plug.
You
I've
call it a
never heard
plug?
that.
No, I don't. There's a lot of older.
Old guys call it a
Yeah,
plug.
old
This is a
timers.
plug.
Yeah.
This is a plug. If you ever see the old guy,
hoops and whatnot can be
Yeah.
called plugs too.
y'all throwing a plug, Y'all you've never heard that before.
No,
I caught them. I used to catch them back in the day throwing plugs.
Okay, well, I might start calling it that now.
I love it. I always call it a crankbait, but.
What about these little guys right here? Can you talk about these, Kane? What are
Yes, okay, so these are the spot removers by Buckeye. We are actually fortunate enough to be partnered with Buckeye Lures. They have been just amazing. And one thing about, the college scene, and like a lot of our viewers, we don't have the funds to go out there and, fish the best of the best of the best of the best and fill our boat up with the best of the best of the best. But we are lucky enough to have sponsorships. And Buckeye, they help us out so much with filling our boats with the best, and it's to nothing for us, right? And the Spot Remover Pro, if you're not familiar with it, it's a shaky head.
Been around a long time.
Yeah, and
The OG kind of a shaky head.
one of the best things about this shaky head that I like, other than honestly what I think is the best screw lock on any shaky head I've used, is the flat bottom, right?
Gets that bait to stand up.
It gets that bait to stand up, and I know everyone has done it before. You guys have a fish tank that you can test lures out.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
the action. You gotta test the action. Right?
yeah, if you put like a floating worm on this and you throw it on some rocks, that lure will stand almost vertical. And that for me is what gets them to bite. Nothing worse than having your shaky head dragging on the bottom. I just feel like the fish don't target that.
Now, for these, are you throwing something like this on a shaky head?
I mean, I definitely will. This is
What are these?
another classic. It's the Robo Worm Straight Tail. This specific color is in Morning Dawn, and this is the 7-inch version. Obviously, this is this is not the right bait. But they make a 6-inch version too.
Yeah, here I'll grab
We
it.
got different sizes of it, but
If you are an Ozarks fisherman, you know this lure, and you know it well.
6-inch.
Yes, and this is Aaron's Magic. Just this lure you can fish on. My favorite way too is actually drop shot, with about a foot leader usually. But back to what we were talking about on the Buckeye Spot Remover. This is something that is absolutely deadly for spots. I mean, for smallmouth too.
Yeah. Even some largemouth.
Yeah.
Put some Magnum shaky heads or
Yeah.
Magnum straight tail worms on. Those largemouth down in the brush pile, liable to grab it.
and I know you like throwing those big.
Yeah,
Those
I'm
big
a big
worms
worm
on
fan.
Yeah,
I
I can
Arkansas, we love throwing those 10,
big
12 inch.
ribbon tail worms.
It might not be Texas or Florida, but we can still throw big worms around
Yeah.
here.
We still got spots that it works pretty good on.
Yeah. For some reason, I don't know. My favorite bite ever on a big worm. I was fishing Beaver Lake down past War Eagle, and there's this little flat with a bunch of trees on it, and I was fishing in about 6 feet of water, and there was a little ledge there that went down to the channel, and it moved to like 20 feet of water. Well, I was kind of messing around. I was like, I wonder if these fish are under 20 feet of water. I cast my lure out there, was working it back to the bank, and I was pulling it up to my boat, and it was like a foot under the water. And boom! Got smoked. I mean smoked. Boom! Set the hook in that thing. It basically flew into the boat. That's how close it was. But I love throwing the big worm.
Those worms they do get the bites, I'll say that. And a lot of times it's not the small fish that are eating them.
Yeah,
a lot of
even though
times
sometimes you will be
it's
surprised.
the occasional, small fish, but a lot of times I see big fish coming out in those big worms. I mean, something about it, they can't resist it.
Especially at night time, throwing a big worm to a brush pile. Out comes
Yeah.
a 5-pounder most of the time. So.
Yeah.
Definitely. But what about this little sneaky lure? I feel like this is a lure that not many people know about, but I feel like it's very similar to almost like a Demiki rig.
Yeah, kind of
What's
before the Mickey rig came, that's what a lot of people throw. And
I would say so, yeah. Not necessarily made for bass, but
A funny
eat it.
story about this is like, when I got my boat like 3 years ago, the guy had live scope on his boat, on the boat that I bought, and I was talking to him because I had not been familiar with live scope. It wasn't big yet. I mean, I guess it was 4 years ago really, and I was like, man, like, what are you doing? And he told me, he was like, well, I've been catching them on, a jigging spoon or whatever you want to call this, a rigging spoon, a steel shad. But he showed me a picture, and he had a spoon from his kitchen, a metal spoon. He cut out a hole for the line and he cut out a hole for the hook, and he caught like 5 fish that day on it. So this lure, and what he was doing is he was just targeting deeper water fish, on a ledge, on a bluff wall, on a channel swing, and he was just jigging for them. And all you got to do is just find the fish, drop it down, pop it a few times, and usually if you're on a good school that are active, they will bite this.
Yep.
And it's funny because when this lure is not working, the Demiki rig, when this is not working, this is
Sometimes that
something
one will.
that's amazing to pick up, right? And I don't know what it is, but I mean, I love having it on my boat. And I'm like I said, we are also fortunate enough to be partnered with Steel Shad, and I have my box full of these now. These have been amazing, especially in the wintertime and into the summertime.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely an easy bait to get in a heavier weight too.
That's
Whereas
true.
the
You
Demiki
get it
rigs,
down there quickly.
exactly.
Yeah.
The Demiki, sometimes you're sitting on that screen for a while, just watching it go down. Whereas
And
you know,
sometimes that
these-
fish will swim off before it gets there too.
That's honestly, I feel like part of the battle is you got to get that lure in front of the fish before he gets either behind it or in front of it.
Yeah, heavy wind
Yeah.
conditions too. I mean, like
Definitely.
I know on last Monday when I went out, there was 35-mile gusts, and you know, we did have this lure to throw, and like you said, when you have the Demiki with the 1/4 ounce or even 3/8 ounce, sometimes when you're casting it out there, you're not allowed to track that lure down with the live scope, and those fish are already gone. But those steel shad, we didn't catch any on it.
And
I
one
will say
thing
that.
about something all metal, a lot of times your live scope will pick that up better because
Yeah.
it's a bit more dense than your typical Demiki plastic style lure is. So
It's
you
hard
get
to see
something that's
these, you know?
all steel. It shows up a little bit better on your screen.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And another aside, actually, I'm a huge crappie fisherman, and their mini steel shads, oh my gosh, crappie will tear them up. So look for that if you're a crappie fisherman like me. I mean, that's something I would instantly get.
Alright, well, what do we got left here?
Okay. I think there's only one more left on the table.
Oh, the classic.
Yep, the classic
Two.
jig. Here we got that brush head style jig with a trim skirt and a little crawl trailer on it. But it seems like today we've been talking about a lot of versatile lures.
Mhm.
From the steel sheds to the rattle traps and crankbaits. And the jig's another one of those that, depending on how you throw it and what trailer you have on it, it can be super versatile and used all throughout the year. In the winter, in the summer, depending on the size of your jig. And it's one of those baits that picks up a lot of big fish too.
Yeah.
A lot of those 5-6 pounders. Whenever you see one of those fish, a lot of times you automatically think it was caught on a jig.
Yeah.
Whether that's in a brush pile or off of rocks. One of my favorite colors is just a good green pumpkin blue. Seems to mimic the crawfish throughout the year a lot. But a lot of people like browns and reds and straight green pumpkins. And
Mhm.
up on Table Rock, you might throw something with some pink or purple in it.
Yeah, like PB&J is one of my
Yeah.
favorite, brown and purple. And kind of like you said, like when you're targeting or trying to locate bass with a crankbait or like a moving bait, like a lipless, once you have the bass found, it's nice to break apart structure with a jig.
That's true.
And like,
A little bit slower presentation.
Mhm.
And
I feel like
sometimes those slower fish that aren't quite as active,
Yeah.
you have that jig right in front of his face.
yeah,
He might reach down there and grab it just to, might be pissing him off since there's two
Yeah.
crawls he might be kind of scared of right in front of his
Definitely.
face. So he'll go ahead and put it in his stomach. That way
yeah.
it's not in his home anymore.
Yeah, and another thing, there's always a lot of talk between trailers, especially with jigs. In the wintertime, I like to get something with a little bit more material on it. So like a chunk, or I have a guy who has custom chunks that I throw on mine. And they just move a little slower, especially when the bite's a little slower. They don't like an ultralight speed crawl. You know, those legs are
Kicking away.
kicking.
Yeah.
But if you have a chunk or like a firetail, I mean, or the porks, you know.
I'm one of the people who likes throwing like a Yamamoto twin-tailed grub in the winter.
Exactly.
So
I love throwing
something
grubs on
a
them
little
too.
A little bit more subtle.
Yeah.
Like on here, we've got like a rage chunk,
Yeah.
but it's all the way up on the jig, kind of like a regular trailer.
Yeah.
But it's one of those baits that kicks quite a bit and moves quite a bit of water. In the winter, sometimes they don't bite that quite as well, and you got to move to something like a normal style chunk that doesn't kick quite as much, or a twin-tailed grub, something along
Yeah.
those lines.
Yeah, I feel like you can customize a jig in so many different ways. I mean, down to the skirt length, to what trailer you're using,
Yeah.
to what kind of jig it is. There's just so many different combinations that you can make.
Yeah.
And the 10 different shapes of lead on the front.
Yeah,
that
they can all be
it.
used for different applications, for different structures, different times of the years. It's just such a vital bait that really, I mean, I don't know anyone that doesn't throw a jig. I feel like almost
everybody
everyone
should have
throws a
some
jig.
in their tackle box or
Yeah.
their boat.
I think as we start doing these videos monthly, there's only a few months in the year where I would not be throwing a jig, but
Yeah.
honestly, I would be throwing this all year round. It's just my favorite.
Yep.
And I mean, do you guys want to move into like just general tips for fishing the wintertime? I mean, like, I know it's hard when you go out in the cold when you have like a weekend available and like you're getting skunked, right? Definitely all these tips we have mentioned will help you catch fish, but I think one of the best things to do is to find the fish. And, you know, we talked a lot about forward-facing sonar and, you know, using your electronics to locate bass, locate shad is honestly one of the better things you can do. So yeah, that's like a bigger tip that I'll have for this time of the year.
And then another tip that I'll have is like even if you don't have electronics or whatnot, you can still kind of beat the bank. There are still some fish, even in 40-degree water here on Beaver. There's still some fish up shallow.
Oh yeah, there's fish shallow year
I
round.
would just say fish the key spots. Don't work down an entire bank because a lot of that water is dead. Just fish those key areas down the bank, whether that's a brush pile and 6 feet of water that you can see the top of sticking up, or a few trees here and there, or some rock and whatnot, maybe rock transitions or a sandy spot. Just make multiple casts in that spot instead of a couple, because those fish are usually, they're like us in the winter, they're slower, they don't want to move quite as fast or as much. So you just gotta make multiple casts at them
Yeah.
to really get them to bite.
And that's actually, so I watched a Jason Christie video, shout out Jason Christie. And he thought that one of the weird things that like forward-facing sonar has showed us is that everyone used to say like during the wintertime the fish are more lethargic, which is true, right? The temperature of the water is going to change their metabolism. But he thinks that they're still as active when it comes to catching them. Like they're not going to be, you know, creeping up on your bait. They're still going to be, you know, shooting out of 60 feet of water to hit your Dominican
Yeah,
rig.
they still gotta eat.
Yeah.
So if they're chasing after a shad, it's
Yeah.
gonna run from them most of the time. So
Yeah.
they still gotta chase after their big fish
Yeah.
and whatnot.
So like, and the reason why I say that is when people say like fish slower in the wintertime. Yeah, fish slower, but like London said, don't go down a whole bank fishing slow, breaking apart every single rock, right? Hit the target areas. And I know you're cold, you know, I get freezing out there sometimes, but you have to make yourself, you know, pull up the trolling motor and move spots. I mean, that's just, you have to do that this time of
fish
year.
bite in certain spots,
Yeah.
not other ones. Even if it's 300 football fields or 3 football fields away from each other.
Yeah. And I think that's special information. Like, I've watched so many YouTube videos about, you know, catching fish in the winter. And that's something that not a lot of people say. And I feel like if I ask someone, or someone asked me the best tip to give them, it would be to not get lazy, right? You gotta keep fishing different spots, locate the bass, and then, you know, let the fish do the work from there.
Not just locating the bass, but
Yeah.
locating the active ones, the hungry ones,
Yeah.
the ones that are eating
Yeah.
at that time period.
Yeah. Because, like, these lures, any of them will catch fish on a given day if you're around fish that are biting.
Yeah.
This is the last 10% of fishing, you know. You know, the first 90% is
Finding those fish
Finding
that
the
are
fish.
willing to eat your bait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, you know, like when people ask, like, oh, did you catch them? Well, not really well. You know, they weren't biting. Well, they were biting somewhere. They're animals.
Yeah.
They're eating
Whenever
somewhere.
there's 200 boats on a lake, there's always somebody who doesn't have a great day on the water, and then there's the person who has the best day of their life. So
Yep. And like,
it just depends on if the fish are active where you're at.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Jacob, anything else to add?
Not that I know. I feel like we've covered pretty much all these baits pretty good. And
Yeah.
think-
I will add. I'll add one more thing. Especially when it gets colder, I like to look at one, water temperature, obviously, but two is water clarity. You know, scientifically, the more sediment in your water, the warmer it will be. I mean, that's a law of thermodynamics, right? So,
Getting technical here.
I mean, it's just the facts. I mean, so if you're out there, I mean, there is fish everywhere in the lake. Let's be real. You can catch them next to the dam in 20-foot visibility, but I find it's easiest to catch them right where that stained water hits the clear water. So, like right now, it's around mid-lake. There was a report that there was a big chunk of dirty water coming out of Blue Springs, moving into Hickory. So I will probably try to maybe see if I can get a fish around there this week. But yeah, I mean, if you can just find that warmer water, I mean, even it's a 4 or 5 degree change, you know, I like fishing there personally.
Yeah, it'll excite those fish a lot of times in the winter. They
Yeah.
get excited that spring's coming too.
Yep. And like you said, as we're moving forward, that you're itching to grab that glide bait and throw it out there. It never hurts to have it always tied on. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching our first episode. It really means a lot to us. Like we said, we're gonna try to get more content out daily on our Instagram channel, and we're gonna try as hard as we can to get content out on our YouTube channel. Jacob?
But yeah, just let us know ideas for if you guys want to see us do any kind of videos upcoming for our YouTube channels and whatnot.
Challenges or anything, honestly.
Yeah, let us know because we definitely want to get posting on here more and just get you guys involved as well.
Definitely.
And just make fun videos to watch. But we just want to say a huge shout out to our sponsors, Yamamoto Baits, Buckeye Lures, Steel Shad, Robo Worm, Buka, all of these brands, they've helped the team so much just by giving us these lures.
Kuda. I mean,
They're
so
all
many.
great.
They're all on our Instagram
There's a
channel.
list on there.
We'll link them down.
But yeah, just thank you to those guys because without them, we wouldn't be able to make all this content and we wouldn't have much to offer for the team. So they definitely help making fishing in college a lot easier and a lot more affordable.
Yep. And I just want to give a shout out to our social medias. Y'all can go follow them after this video if you want to see more content like this, or if you just want to follow us throughout the fishing season. You can go visit our Instagram or Facebook, Arkansas Bass Fishing, and be sure to like and subscribe and go follow those other pages too. Thank y'all.